Excited about this. It's exactly what it sounds like, and I couldn't be more excited to actually just watch a conspiracy thing, right? This is going to be even better than our Flat Earth Fridays, and those are pretty amazing. So, let's do it. Let's do it. Enough talking. I just want to keep an eye over here and make sure that we're not peaking during these ads. I think it'll be a good judge. But this is going to be too long. I think we're fine though. I think we're fine. I think the volume is set up right.
Grotesquely violated skeletons discovered recently in Ireland have thrown new light onto our ever-growing obsession with vampires and our fear of the undead.
This burial was very obviously treated in a violent and aggressive fashion.
Okay, that would make sense.
Probably the most extraordinary deviant burial I've ever seen. I think the message is still the same. It's a very determined attempt to keep this person down.
Archaeologists are now investigating why these bodies were subjected to such violence. The answer may lie in horrors that have haunted us for centuries.
Okay, good.
Miller, 25
We're ready
years
for it.
old,
We're ready
also
for this
showing
nonsense.
signs of the condition of vampirism mentioned.
There was this intense fear of vampires and revenants, people coming back from the dead and haunting the living.
They were basically corrupting corpses that had kind of escaped from their graves and wandered about.
The Irish skeletons can help.
Excuse me. Excuse me, lady.
Corrupting corpses that had kind of escaped from their graves and wandered about.
Negative, Ghost Rider. Corpses escaping from their graves and just wandering about. Not today, Satan. Not today. No, sir.
The Irish skeletons can help us understand our ancient terror of the undead.
I like that they shove a stone in its mouth.
From. To explain these shocking burials,
stop it from being capable of
must
biting
unlock
you.
Clues from mysterious medieval texts and harness modern forensic technology. The story will even take us to a terrifying 21st century case in Romania.
I'm going to take us back so everybody can hear this again. Because that's...
texts and harness modern forensic technology. The story will even take us to a terrifying 21st century case in Romania.
21st century? You realize that means it happened within the last 23 years? Because the 21st century, it starts at the year 2000. This isn't just like people in a long forgotten past saying, yeah, there's some vampire shit happening. This is people within the last 23 years saying, yeah, there's some vampire shit happening. What, dude? I couldn't be more excited. This is also, I believe, like a History Channel type of a show. Unearthed History. I've heard of Unearthed History, but I haven't watched it ever. But I believe it's like a History Channel or Discovery Channel type series. Do you have rabies? The fuck? I gotta say, the jaws on the skulls we saw earlier, none of those skulls had, like, vampire teeth, you know?
The mountains and lakes of Western Ireland have long been seen as a land of mystery, haunted by fairies and
Fuck you, I want to live there. What is this? Fuck everyone. I'll take the castle on the island in the middle of the lake. I'll live there, thanks. And everything within, let's say, 200 yards of the shore of the lake is also mine. Okay? That'll be my property. If you would like to come see me, this is where I reside. And if you try to come see me, you better hope that I know, because I will quite obviously see everybody who's coming to visit before you get to me, and I might not want you home. Okay? Not in my home anyway. You can go wherever you want, but you can't stay here, goddammit.
Magic.
The fuck? That is the coolest thing ever. I want it.
Archaeologists began an excavation in a little-known area called Kiltetian that would open a window onto our darkest fears. They were searching for a medieval bishop's palace dating from the 12th century. Chris Reed is one of the directors of the project.
When we started
Bishop's
excavating,
Palace?
we were hoping or anticipating that this was possibly the location of this bishop's palace. And we couldn't have been more wrong.
Oh,
They began to excavate.
we were looking for a bishop's palace, and little did we know what we'd actually stumbled upon was little vampire Lucy trying to get at our blood. The fuck? What a mistake.
Underneath the flagstones of a ruined building near the Lost Palace.
When we lifted
Oh, no, sir. If anybody knows of a good ad blocker that works, I'd love it. Because mine fucks up being able to stream if I have it on at the same time. It actually blocks the stream. So, I need better solutions. Or more, really, because this works fine when I'm not streaming.
lifted up the stones themselves in here, we literally had faces looking back at us, which had been crushed flat by the floor, indicating that whoever built this building at whatever time period knew that they were building directly on top of human remains, which is quite a dark and gloomy kind of thing to do.
Whoa. They knew they were directly on top of the remains?
Within this quite small area, literally about 3 meters by 3 meters, we excavated somewhere between 30 and 40 skeletons, literally stacked one on top of another, in quite shallow graves.
What's up, Amelia?
This was just one of a series of remarkable discoveries. The team made more cuttings into a raised burial platform in the field.
What?
Each was filled with bodies.
But why would you be shocked or something to find bodies if you knew it was like a burial mound? Then, like, wouldn't you expect to find the bodies? Like, why is he talking about it like it's surprising? That's different. That's the first time we've seen somebody's canine tooth that looks more exposed. It's not longer, but it's more exposed up here. The fact that they built directly on top of these corpses is also wild. You would normally, like, if you found a body, you'd be like, ah, shit. Especially, like, not in modern day, but in the past, right? When they were building castles, you'd be like, hey, you know what? I don't want the spirits mad at me or, like, to sully myself or desecrate myself by messing with the dead. Like, and you'd like be superstitious of what would happen. You'd not want to do that. So the fact that they built directly on top of these bodies they knew were there is actually really wild.
Based upon where these cuttings are actually located, the density of burials and their depth, and if we sort of assume that all the areas in between are similarly filled with burials, we're probably looking at a total burial population of between 2,500 and 3,000 people, which makes it a very, very, very substantial cemetery.
Whoa.
Late one morning,
it's a lot of,
Chris was called over to see a new skeleton emerging from the earth.
Okay.
This skeleton in particular was clearly treated in a very violent and aggressive fashion.
Jesus. It's like
Visually,
they crushed all
quite
their
striking,
skulls.
particularly the legs, the way they've been twisted and bent back up around the stone. It's really disturbing, and it's also shocking as well, but it also makes it very interesting.
What?
It seems that this large boulder was deliberately placed in the grave to deform the skeleton.
That's wild. That looks so creepy. Like, look at how messed up the skull is. That makes it look extra creepy. Like the rib cage and everything. Like they really just destroyed this body. This is crazy as shit. I wonder what this all like comes down to at the end. Like, were they actually vampires? Or was it just superstition? Were these like crazy people with rabies that like were trying to survive on human flesh and human blood, or is it just like some kind of superstitious fear, you know? I wonder. We're watching the vampire corpses video. I want to know what this is about. They found corpses that are credited to being vampire corpses, and I want to see it.
Was deliberately placed in the grave to deform the skeleton. Professor Mark Horton has excavated hundreds of medieval burials, and he is astonished by the find.
I've never seen anything so extraordinary. You could actually do this naturally. It's as if this person has been broken into many bits and they're bound together into a great bundle of flesh. The spinal column would come round here, round underneath the chest, back round, and then the pelvis must have been here. It's almost as if they'd broken the body up, bound it in such a way that it couldn't possibly ever come back to life again. In my entire archaeological career, I've never ever seen anything quite like it.
As they dug further down into the layers of burials, there were more remarkable finds.
On archaeological sites, the best part of the excavation is when somebody shouts out loud, "I found something," you know, everybody.
Oh, well, I'd imagine so.
And as the skeleton was being uncovered,
everybody's
it was
hoping
very,
to find
very clear
dragons.
that, yeah, there was this large stone stuck in the mouth. Visually, it's a very dramatic sort of image.
None of the team had ever found anything like it before. But then there was another discovery.
Another one.
You always expect to find something unexpected on an excavation, but then when we found a second one, and in the exact same area, we knew we had something that was special.
And then you had this creepy
But why
shit.
were these bodies treated with such violence after they were already dead? The archaeologists removed the 3 skeletons from the site, along with more than 100 other burials. They took them back to the lab for further analysis. As the skeletons were cleaned, shocking evidence emerged about the deaths of some of those buried in the cemetery.
Chris, do you think these look like cut marks?
Yeah, definitely. Now that's a big chop mark and then a smaller one parallel to it. Very, very straight edge.
The cut marks suggest that some of the Kiltetian bodies were killed by bladed weapons, like swords or spears.
Yeah, that would make sense.
In that time in Ireland, you have multiple different kingships in the region. Each of them is vying for authority. Warfare is almost an endemic part of society in these periods, and the role of warriors comes through very strongly when we look at the literature and the evidence that survives. People were aware of the constant fear and aggression that could be part of their lives.
That makes sense, though. That's fair.
Even in this violent age, the mutilation of these bodies was extraordinary. Were the people who...
Hey, now.
How'd you wanna get like this? How'd you wanna get like this?
buried them afraid of what they might
No, we
become.
don't. You're ruining the vampire vibes with your crazy fucking ad. Who's that?
The strange burials in Ireland are not the only ones that have been found. They've also been discovered all over Western Europe.
The fuck?
Skeletons weighed down with large boulders were excavated in the
Why?
Czech Republic in the 1960s.
I can't wait till we get to the why. Like, it's crazy that it happens. Like, I've known that, like, there were some that this took place. I didn't realize, like, there was a whole archaeological site that's just basically littered with them. That's even more crazy. This literally just makes the whole thing more crazy than I ever anticipated this being. What the fuck?
Bizarre burials have also been found in England.
And for a medieval burial in Southwell were found nails, not these actual ones, but very similar ones, that had been deliberately placed in the body. So one was found through the right shoulder, another one was in through the heart, and another one through the left ankle. Almost as if they deliberately placed them there to make sure that the body could never rise up again.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
A number of burials have been excavated.
And let's face it, they staked the heart, right? With the nail, they staked the heart, basically.
Of people who have either had their heads cut off, or been placed face down, or had the legs tied, or been mutilated in various other ways. There's even one that's got a spear thrust through it.
Archaeologists and historians
they just buried it with the spear.
There may be a very particular reason for these disturbing medieval burials.
I think the general explanation for this has to be that these are people who are seen as a threat. They're going to go on walking around after they've died. They're going to come out of their graves, and the living have to keep them down.
Could this explain the extraordinary Kiltetian skeletons with the rocks in their mouths? Were they treated as people who might return from the dead? Dr. Katrina Mackenzie is an osteoarchaeologist specializing in bone analysis.
I want to know why they were afraid of that, though.
She will examine the skeletons for any clues that could explain why they were buried so violently.
The thing that interests me most is that when you look at the skeleton, you're looking at an actual human being who lived and died long ago.
That's fair.
And you're looking almost directly into the past. It's always really exciting when there is something unusual about the skeleton or about the burial position, because you just can't help but wonder what it was that happened in this person's life that meant that they were buried in a different manner.
Well, not just that they were buried in a different manner, but that they were completely mutilated and desecrated corpses. Like, that's... You don't normally just desecrate corpses, right? Like, there's a story that led to these people being brutally killed, and then their corpses brutally dismembered and just desecrated. And then putting buildings right on top of them as well. Like, yeah, get up now. Like, holy shit.
Katrina has reassembled one of the skeletons with the stone found in its jaws.
Look at that, the pelvis is broken.
This individual is
shattered.
A male individual. It's a young adult, which is probably between 30 to 35 years of age.
You guys might be misgendering this vampire, and I can't believe you have the audacity to believe that biology can be proven by measuring bones. Like, there's a biological difference between the way we're born. Like in the pelvis that's shattered there. There's no way.
Bare bones can give us a glimpse of what this man might have been like.
He was quite a muscular individual. He's got quite prominent muscle markings on his skeleton, which shows that he was quite physically active during his life.
If you say so.
But it is the stone that intrigues.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people were physically active during their lives back then.
Which was forced into the jaws of Burial 102.
Look at how big that stone is just in her hands. Like, compare it to her hands, because she's holding it away from her, so it's deceptive in comparison to the rest of her body. It's an optic illusion where perception makes the stone larger because it's closer to us with her hands extended. But if you compare it to just like the length of her fingers, her fingertips, the width of her fingers, and think about how big that stone actually is, imagine that being in your jaw. And being in your jaw with the way that she's holding it, basically. Like, this was in the roof of the mouth, was it not? So, imagine that. Like, that's what they did with these corpses. This isn't something you would just casually do. There was a story behind this that's got to be just amazingly captivating.
As you can see, it's quite large and it's quite heavy as well. It's triangular in shape. Yeah, I've not seen anything quite like this before in my own experience.
Could the skull itself reveal any further clues about why the body was treated so violently? When it was recovered from the earth, it was already in an extremely fragile state.
Well, yeah, they destroyed these corpses.
As the team
and dug
cleaned
them
and
up.
prepared it for analysis, they began to realize the extent of the damage.
Do you think there's any chance of the skull actually being pieced back together?
I don't think it's going to be possible for us to reconstruct it more than I already have. The facial bones were very crushed when they were in the ground, and so I literally have hundreds of tiny fragments of mostly facial bones, which it would be near impossible to piece it all back together.
Whoa. So to do that is like you dropped a huge stone on their skull, or you bashed it with a hammer to the point where their face no longer exists. That's intense. You hear them helicopters out there again? I hear them helicopters out there again. I just don't know if the microphone picks it up very well.
The past is not going to unlock its secrets easily for the Kiltesian archaeologists. Centuries of farming on the land may well have damaged the skull. But even graveyards
played a role,
that
that's
haven't
for
been
sure.
farmed or built on can yield skeletons in strange positions. At Berkeley in Gloucestershire, another cemetery is under excavation. Project leader Professor Mark Horton knows how easily bodies can shift from the position in which they were buried.
This is a fairly normal early medieval burial. You can see the bones are in the ground, the arm bone, the skull and so forth. We've just found it, we're cleaning it up at the moment. But how a body reaches this position is quite a complicated process. Some bodies literally blow up underground as the gases are generated and it's in a confined space. And, there's stories of people walking around churchyards and you hear them going pop, pop as these bodies are exploding. Bones can go everywhere, if you like. In fact, here you can see probably the skull wasn't laid in that position, might have fallen over into that position. So when people discover bodies in the ground, they can be in all sorts of extraordinary positions. They're not necessarily how they've been laid down.
Okay, that makes sense.
So could this explain the strange burials at Kiltesian?
That makes sense, but we've seen the bodies of corpses that are found on battlefields from, like, Viking era, Roman, like the Roman Empire eras, and, like, Alexander the Great time frame. Like, we've seen corpses that have been through those battles and are just in, like, a mass pit of bodies, right? And they aren't contorted in the way that one was contorted with the rock between its legs. You know what I mean? Like, that was pretty intense.
Could the stones in the jaws somehow have slipped in there by accident, as the result of violent contortions during decomposition? Chris Reed is convinced this is not the explanation.
No, that doesn't make much sense.
It was very obviously intentional.
Stones.
This is not a stone which rolled into the mouth after the burial process had been completed or through later disturbance. It could only have gotten there if it was put in quite forcefully.
The burials with the stones in the mouth are very interesting because they're large boulders and they look like they've been pushed in with some force into the dead body. And it suggests that they're trying to block the mouth. And that could be to stop a soul having left the dead body from re-entering into it and reanimating that body so it could rise from the dead.
There is another feature of the Kiltesian burials
that would make sense.
which
That's a good theory.
confirms that they were entirely deliberate.
So here's a counter theory, right? What if it's just customary for the people there that when you're dead, your body is gone, but that you have to shove a stone in the mouth of your loved ones when they die to stop the soul from re-entering their body. That way their soul moves on to the next life or whatever comes after death in their theology, right? Wouldn't that be some wild possibility? Like, that's very possible in just human history, that that's the way somebody would do something, and the way people would react and respond and do certain things. It just makes sense that that would be a possibility as well.
Bodies were discovered right on the edge of the cemetery.
I don't think that's the case.
As if they were exiled from the
but
other
it would
graves.
make sense to exist as a theological
we had picked
thing.
up the edges of a shallow ditch here in the cutting, and it's within this
But then
ditch
they've
that
also
we actually
desecrated
found
the shit out of them
the first
in a weird
of our
way.
2 stone-in-mouth skeletons. So it was sort of lying out on this axis, which is not quite east-west, but northwest-southeast. And the body would have been lying this way, with its feet slightly raised, because on one side of the ditch, and the head slightly raised at this side, looking in this direction with the stone in the mouth.
Archaeologists use a special term for these strange burials in Ireland and elsewhere. They call them deviant burials.
Deviant,
Deviant means abnormal.
All right.
Anything that's particularly strange or uncharacteristic, not what you would expect from a Christian burial in this period. The Christian faith had a well-established canon of beliefs. You don't take objects with you. When the world ends,
Right.
everyone will rise from their grave and face the rising sun, so that burials are orientated east to west. And because this was such a matter of conformity, I think when there's a deviation away from that expected pattern, it suggests some deliberate thought process has gone behind why you are doing something so
That's a
abnormal.
rational line of thinking to take. That's for sure. That's a
All
very
the
rational
evidence
way of going through
suggests
that.
that the deviant
Makes perfect
Cultician
sense.
burials were treated as if the dead might return from the grave.
I do like that they call them deviant burials. Really do. I don't know why, but I really do. I just like that they found a way to use the word deviant in archaeology, and it's fantastic. I love it.
And become the medieval equivalent of vampires.
Yeah. Nosferatu's
Vampires
creepy-ass
have become
fingernails.
entertainment, but in the 12th century, they were frighteningly real.
The medieval mind lived in a world of monsters and dragons. They believed in supernatural events. So the notion that the body could come back and be reanimated wasn't that strange. But actually the ideas were very much fostered by the church. Because when the soul left the body, it went to a place called purgatory. And if the soul, the person, had left a particularly evil life, that soul will be tortured in the most horrendous fashion. And so the notion that it would escape from purgatory and come back to haunt the earth was a very powerful idea.
Chronicles and histories from the period
Interesting.
recorded terrifying stories about the undead, as if they were true. Historian John Blair has come to St. Peter's Church in Stapenhill, near Burton-on-Trent. He's on the trail of a particularly chilling account, which demonstrates the reality of this fear.
The extraordinary story of the Stapenhill vampires begins when 2 peasants on Burton Abbey territory are poached by a lord nearby, and he persuades them to move to the village of Drakelow, which is just down the road.
The story is set in 1085, when the peasants were moving to a thriving community of several hundred people. But soon,
All right.
their fortunes changed.
It's a pretty decent-sized community for the time frame, right?
For memories that
Several
last
hundred
and
people.
produce that last longer too.
It's not like a crazy crowded area, but it's also not like a small nothing nowhere place for the period of time, right?
Because they die suddenly while they're eating, and they're buried here in this churchyard behind me. The next night, they're seen walking around, sometimes in the form of men with coffins on their backs, and sometimes in the form of animals.
With coffins on
this
their
must have
backs?
been enormously frightening to these
What the
people,
fuck?
who clearly thought that they were confronted really with the living dead.
Historians call those who
We're getting
return
into
from the
good
grave
stuff now.
revenants. In medieval times, it was believed
That
they
makes
had
perfect sense.
terrifying powers to make animals and people fall sick and even die.
We get quite vivid accounts in the 12th century about revenants. They are often returning to the place where they lived, and they are often waking up their neighbours at night and telling them to come out, or calling people they know by name, and then these people will mysteriously die of some plague in the few days after.
Oh shit.
The villagers of Drakelow
an
had no
absolute
doubt
nightmare of an
that they were
existence.
confronting the evil dead.
Everybody
That's
got
for
so
sure.
frightened that they moved away, and soon the village was almost deserted. The villagers got very worried about this, and they got permission from the bishop to dig the two peasants up. They found that the bodies were uncorrupt, but the cloths over their faces were stained with blood.
What?
The villagers were terrified. They took the bodies from their coffins and
That would be terrifying to see. You kidding me? You dig up some corpses and what you see is mouths covered in blood, but the bodies are otherwise seemingly undisturbed. So, like, you telling me this thing's got blood around its mouth, but it appears to be just a corpse otherwise? But it's been in the ground a while, but there's just blood there now, right? Like, what? No. Nuh-uh. But maybe that's... I don't know if they did the same type of thing then that they do now, because now, like, your blood is removed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole process before you actually get buried. So, it's strange.
beheaded them. Then they cut open the corpses and tore out their hearts.
Jesus.
They carried the hearts quite a long way, probably to this hilltop we're on now. It's not quite certain, but it's likely that it was this place which was later a beacon for warnings and signals, and may have been a place for executing criminals.
I mean, it looks like a
the
good
dead
spot for
villagers were
beacons.
treated as if they were still
Signals.
alive. They were
Like a
executed
signal
as
flare type of
punishment
thing?
for crimes they had
It's a good
committed
hill for that.
after their deaths. It is said that 2 black crows rose and flew out of the smoke from the burning hearts. The thin veil between life and death could easily be crossed. Some were so fearful of returning as a revenant that they left detailed instructions on how to avoid it.
One of the very best...
Like, look. They've caged in some of the tombs. See, so some of the families are actually just concerned that they're going to be, that they could rise as a revenant. And so they're actually requesting to be, like, for steps to be taken, like these cages. And so think about it, and it might have been like, hey, like, don't let me come back as one of these creepy-ass revenants. You tie my legs to a stone and dismember me or whatever. You know, like, that's crazy. But, I mean, people going to do what they're going to do, and that seems to be what happened. This is wild.
Descriptions
Fascinating.
we've got of the practice of revenants.
I'm so
Middle Ages,
captivated by
comes
this.
from here, from Berkeley, in Gloucestershire. It's told by William of Malmesbury, one of the most reliable of the medieval chroniclers, writing in the 12th century. And he describes a witch living here in the nunnery in the 1060s, who was so worried that her body was going to be reanimated after her death that she left very specific instructions that when she died, she should be sewn up in a stag skin, placed in a stone sarcophagus, and then that should then be wrapped around with 3 massive sets of chains and locks and buried in the ground.
Holy
Well, what
shit.
actually happened was that the body was placed in the ground, everyone did incantations for 3 days, but even that didn't stop the devil, who, according to the story, came in a black horse, dug up the body, broke the chains asunder, and took the witch away to haunt this place forever after.
Now that's a fucking legend. That is quite the myth.
There are many
like
other
folklore
stories
of the
about
area,
the
you know what I
undead
mean?
recorded
Holy
by
shit.
priests and chroniclers. in the 12th century. Could the deviant Kiltetian burials date from the same time as these extraordinary stories? The Irish team are going to carbon date the two skeletons to find out.
You can do that with teeth.
Samples will be sent off for analysis to discover just when these people died. These ancient beliefs in the undead have survived in literature and folklore for centuries. Even today, in parts of Central Europe, people guard against the possibility of the dead rising from the grave.
Yeah, nobody wants to be zombied, all right?
Modern archaeology is reinforcing the reality
Vampires
of these fears,
are just,
as it reveals burials in which bodies have been staked, chained, and weighed down with heavy stones. But how did this fear evolve into what we recognize?
A whole other world awaits you this
They
summer.
use Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Fantastic.
As the vampire, the blood-sucking creature that stalks our TV screens and our nightmares. How did a folk terror become a modern fascination? In December 1732, a team of Austrian military doctors was sent to investigate a disturbing series of deaths in a Serbian village, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Uh-oh.
The doctors were led by a senior surgeon called Johannes Fluckinger.
A woman by the name of...
Say that dude's name's 3 times fast. Johannes Fluckinger. Go ahead. Just say that 3 times fast. I could barely stumble through it once, so I'm not going to try. But I'd like to know what your results were.
Fluckinger would have been a highly trained surgeon for the period. Military surgeons were the best surgeons you could have. They were working at a very fast pace. They had more patients than any other surgeons could ever see, and they had to operate quickly and efficiently. So the training he would have had as a military surgeon would have been extremely high.
The villagers claimed that 17 people had died suddenly over a 3-month period, and that many of them had become vampires.
She is quite complete and undecayed.
Fluckinger meticulously recorded his observations. In this new age of science, he thought that the villagers' beliefs belonged to the medieval past.
She had herself said before her death...
Thinks himself a man of science.
She painted herself with the blood of a vampire. Wherefore both she and her child, who died right after birth, must also become vampires.
No.
Fluckinger's main mission would have been to quash any idea that vampires were real, and also to get to the bottom of what exactly was going on. One of the big concerns would have been, for the authorities, was there an epidemic of some sort?
That would make sense. But I just can't help but think of, like, she had a kid that was, like, stillborn, it sounds like. It died at birth, they said. And that was considered to be a vampire, too, so it also had to be gotten rid of, right? We like this for sure. So it seems like that's kind of where they are at. Is that she became a vampire, so her child's a vampire, and it just makes me think, was Twilight right? Do we have to give Twilight a dub for this? Do they deserve a dub for that? I don't know how I feel about this. I just don't know. But we're gonna finish this video tomorrow because this is a long one. We're gonna save it. I want to be able to enjoy that again some more. That's for absolute sure.